Hello, it's Hushi, and I have another video. I'm sorry it's been so long since last time. I just kind of got really busy and was occupied doing a lot of stuff, and, well, the last week has been a little bit crazy, I think. Just about all across the board, hasn't it? But today I wanted to talk extemporaneously about something that I haven't really covered for a long time on this channel, and I would like to get back to the Lego Star Wars game because it was a lot of fun, and eventually I need to get through Jedi Power Battles again. When I was doing those videos, it was at a very difficult time in life for me, so I don't think I really gave them enough of an upbeat and amusing kind of experience, but I do intend to get back to them sometime. I really need to get a headset with a decent microphone, but maybe I can manage, I don't know. In any case, today I wanted to talk about something that had been brought up, and something that I've actually wanted to talk about for a while, but I was talking to a friend and they were saying that there was a rumor that George Lucas was going to demand being at the helm of the Star Wars films again. And some people were relieved mainly because of The Last Jedi, which, aside from the world building, the porgs, the Vulptexes, the custodians, caretakers, aside from a lot of the universe building stuff, was a gigantic mess and a really objectively terrible film. As always, though, the galaxy building, the world building of the setting was fantastic. It was great, and I love the porgs. The porgs are one of my favorite things that has happened to the series in forever. I think the porgs are absolutely one of my number one favorite sci-fi animals. I think they're marvelous, and I adore them. But the movie around them, it would have been a better movie if it had just followed the porgs. Like, they were there most of the time, just follow them. Let them tell the story. It's just like the original story that I think they did a comic, and I think they did a Lego Star Wars thing recently that followed the droids through the series, which I think would be great. Like, that would be fantastic. It would be so much better than following most of the people we end up following. But in any case, I just wanted to mention why George Lucas trying to take this series back would not necessarily be a great thing. Because as fond as I am of The Phantom Menace, mainly because it has so much potential, and I know a lot of people don't like Jar Jar. I don't really care. I don't feel strongly one way or another about him. I think The Phantom Menace had a lot of feeling like the old serials, which Star Wars was inspired by, and I feel like that was an especially good thing to be true to. And even though the prequels were something that, as I will talk about soon, should really never have happened the way they did, at least The Phantom Menace started it off with a lot of potential. A lot of potential for interesting things to happen. A lot of potential to see the Jedi when they were still really at more of a high point than, of course, them barely existing in the original trilogy. I will say this before getting into anything else. Lucas's decision not to set the prequels in the older age of masses of Jedi versus masses of Sith was a mistake. Nobody wants to read, watch, or hear a story where you know how it ends, and the way it ends is for all the protagonists to lose, and the main protagonist to lose the worst of all and become a completely irredeemable monster. Nobody wanted that. Nobody was asking for that. And especially not in a way that George Lucas provided it, which was bullshit. It was riddled with mistakes from his own fucking work. He couldn't even remember the last film in the fucking original trilogy by the time he finished with the prequels. And it's very obvious. Episode 3 is the worst film in the entire series. Like, yeah, The Last Jedi sucked, but at least it had something to redeem in it. At least it had good parts. Revenge of the Sith is like... Revenge of the Sith should have been titled Revenge of the Shit, because it was just a whole bunch of shit from start to finish. Something happened at the beginning, something happened at the end, and then there was a whole lot of filling in the gaps with stuff we didn't want to see and didn't care about ultimately in a lot of parts of those. But he went completely overboard, just completely to excess. We knew Palpatine was not going to die in Episode 3 because he is there in the original trilogy. We knew that Anakin was going to become Darth Vader, so there was absolutely no tension at all in anything he did. We knew what was going to happen. If we had seen A New Hope, Episode 4, the original Star Wars, we knew that Obi-Wan was not going to lose his duel with Anakin on Mustafar. We knew all of those things. And even though Lucas completely fucked up in his treatment of Padme, who was very explicitly indicated to have not died in childbirth in Return of the Jedi, because how the fuck would Leia even have memories of their mother being sad all the time if she had died in childbirth? It makes a very important moment in character development completely irrelevant and made up. There's no way it could have happened that way. There's no way to reconcile those two things. All you can do is point at Lucas and say, he forgot what he wrote in his own fucking script. What a dumbass. Anakin killing the kids, completely needless. Order 66, completely needless. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody cares about the clones. They were a stupid idea in the first place. But if we were gonna do clones, and if clones were featuring so prominently in the films and in all of the supplemental materials, because goddamn, there was clone shit everywhere, forever, while those fucking movies were on, and it was fucking miserable, but I'll get to that. Why not have Anakin be put in suspended animation or something, and have Palpatine have his whole plan be to make a clone of Anakin, who is potentially the most powerful Force user ever, turn him to the dark side, and then use him for whatever Palpatine wants, and since clones are unstable, he'll probably die quicker. So, Palpatine won't even have to worry about the Sith thing of the apprentice eventually killing their teacher, because he's probably going to die before Palpatine does. Palpatine has operated this exact same way with all of his other apprentices. This is a standard Sith operating procedure. But instead, we have completely pointless subplots about clones, culminating in possibly the biggest fuck you to fans that has ever existed in the entire Star Wars franchise. Yeah, the sequels were not particularly respectful to fans, or anything that had gone before, but oh my god, you people have fucking forgotten what a load of crap episodes 2 and especially 3 were. I saw a parody that dubbed and re-edited scenes from the first 3 episodes that painted the Jedi as party hounds and C-3PO as some sort of evil mastermind. Very funny, by the way. And it was actually also a better story than what the prequels ended up being. So I want you to remember this. I want you to keep this in mind. Don't think that Lucas will somehow do it better, because he won't. There is no way he will do it better. He's not a good enough writer. He doesn't seem to remember what he even fucking wrote, and he has no sense of either dramatic tension or a compelling story most of the time. I think the only reason why the original trilogy was so good, it's sort of like my opinion of American Horror Story. The original trilogy of Star Wars was so good because they had to fucking try. They didn't have all of this fame and all of these fortunes, and people were still willing to say, George, that's a dumb idea. Go back to the drawing board and do it again. We can't bank on this shit. They were desperate when they made Star Wars. They were really hedging their bets too, like, they had so much stuff ready just in case Star Wars flopped horribly, which they kind of expected it to do. It was a shocking success, but they were ready in case it didn't do well. And throughout the next couple of films, it was very clear that, while it was a success, they were still going to have to put in a lot of effort to keep it a success and to keep it marketable. And I think overall, despite the generally kind of depressing, if you think about it, feel of the films as they went on, it did a good job. It was a good story, well told, mostly, that had some points in it where you could just be like, but there was so much to work with, there was so much to think about, and there was so much that the fans had done in what was called the extended universe, and there was a lot of great attitude. And one thing that I will give George a lot of credit for is the fact that he was basically okay with anything as long as it did not completely contradict the films. And that's fair. I find a lot of the supplemental materials and things like that a lot easier to digest if I just say, okay, well, they don't explicitly contradict the films, but I also don't explicitly have to take them as this is what absolutely happened 100%. That is part of what made the fandom so big and so passionate about it, is that everyone could have their own opinion of what happened between the lines. That is good stuff, and that is smart thinking. It's when you get obsessed with mine is the only official stamp, and if you do anything I don't like, it just didn't happen. Fuck you. Well, to that I say fuck you, because that's just not how fiction is digested. That's not how it is consumed. Everyone will have a different perspective. Everyone will have something different to look at, and a place that is different to look from, whenever they consume any kind of fiction, art, expression, anything. So on one hand, maybe, if that's the attitude that is taken going forward, maybe. But the prequels really proved that Lucas had no idea what people really wanted to see, and he also had no idea how to give it to them. I do think that Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was trying to set up a lot of things that would be different than they ultimately ended up being, because there were a lot of people criticizing here and there, people bitching about Jar Jar or saying that this element wasn't enough or that element was too bad. He tried to please the fans and then forgot what he was actually doing. There was all this stuff around too, like there was the Clone Wars animation and the Clone Wars animated series that came later, all these other outside stories, video games, and it pisses me off that especially Episode 3 destroyed so much of the wonder and the ability to have that sense of wonder, because if you explicitly say and show on screen, well, all these Jedi are dead, they were obviously just complete idiots, which is basically what the prequels seem to be painting them as, increasingly as it goes on. At least in Episode 1 they seem to be sensible. Episode 2, they lose their fucking minds and seem just not to have a fucking clue. Episode 3, by that time it's just like, what is wrong with you? Do you have a problem? Like, these should be the most insightful people in the entire galaxy. And yeah, I understand this, oh well, they were too big for their britches and this was the fall of the Jedi, but it's stupid. It's so stupid the way that it's done. And yeah, maybe it would be that way in real life because, the world tends to give you the stupidest possible version of anything. But it's not something you want to see on the screen. Nobody that saw the original trilogy wanted to see that shit. Especially since we could have just used our imaginations and thought, well, all these interesting characters that have a lot of potential but don't have a lot of screen time in the films, it would be great to just let my imagination go and imagine all their fun adventures and how they escaped the Jedi fall and are out there somewhere and fighting for good and fighting against the Empire. No, forget it. Episode 3, just fuck you all. Fuck all your imagination, all your creativity, fuck the entire fandom, because Episode 3. And what makes it even worse is that by the time of Episode 3, he was so relying on people having seen outside stuff to make the movies work, and you can't do that. That's bad filmmaking. Don't rely on people having exposure or willingness, even desire, to have any exposure to anything outside the fucking film you're making. You can't do that. Don't do that. General Grievous is the poster child of this cinematic failure, because nobody fucking knew who he was in the movie. He ultimately accomplished nothing, and he was a completely ludicrous, useless, piece of shit character that died in the most ridiculously stupid, pointless way, and was just yet another aspect of Revenge of the Sith that made it not sci-fi, but horror. It was not a sci-fi film. It was not a sci-fi adventure as the other films had been. Even though I don't like Episode 2 and I find it interminably boring and completely unlikable, it at least is a much better film than Episode 3 because at the very least, in Episode 2, we don't have to see shitloads of outside material to even understand what a person is and what they are doing. Films should be self-contained. Or at the very least, if you're going to do a story in a medium, it should be self-contained within that medium. If we are going to see cinematic films, you should be able to get the entire story just from watching the films. You should not have to read a guide, least of all an encyclopedia, to understand what the fuck is going on and who the fuck are these people who have not appeared before now and are suddenly appearing now, and everybody's impressed like we're supposed to know who they are. It would be like Truman Capote walking in the set of Alien and everybody just playing it as if it's part of the script. Although comparing General Grievous to Truman Capote is really insulting Truman Capote. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about this unfortunate misconception that if this happens, somehow Star Wars will be completely fixed. It'll be just like new, and no, it won't. They wasted the opportunity with a lot of the old actors. There are people that we're never going to be able to get in a film again, and that's very tragic. That's very sad to me. Especially as the sequels, well, J.J. Abrams is a very safe filmmaker. He will put a formula together that is guaranteed to be successful, which is why The Force Awakens is basically just A New Hope with the serial numbers filed off and characters slightly changed. It has basically the same beats and the same flow, inexplicably, and while it does kind of shit on everything that happened after Return of the Jedi and kind of casts it in a bad light, so it's like, oh well, I guess that celebration was pretty premature. It does kind of ruin a lot of what went before, and that is a mistake of it. That's one of the things that I dislike the most about the sequels, is that they have no respect for what went before, and they kind of ruin the original trilogy and the entire point that it had. Anything it accomplished, the sequels kind of undermine, which I think is a bad choice and a big mistake. But similarly, the prequels were not particularly respectful to the original trilogy or its fans, and Revenge of the Sith really encapsulates that. It is a bad movie, poorly made, that is not even in the same genre as the other films in the series. It is a horror film, and it's not the kind of horror film that you watch and say, this is a well-made horror film, because that's what it set out to be. It obviously did not intend to be that. It just became that, and Lucas had no idea what he was creating. Some may criticize The Phantom Menace for being a bit ADHD, and it's, oh well, this is a quick scene over here, this is a quick scene over here, who's that? Doesn't matter, we can't focus on that right now, we gotta move to this other scene. But at the very least, it told a story, and it set you up to actually have a story that had beats and a flow, and was interesting to watch. Like, it was, at the very least, visually very striking and beautiful. Episode 2 was, like, meandering all over the place, not a lot of things happening, and then when they did happen, they were usually either stupid or pointless. And it just got worse with Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is really the pinnacle of George Lucas crafting a supremely masturbatory gesture. That is all it is. It's not for the fans. It's not for the story. It is for George Lucas, who at the time was going through a lot of really serious personal problems. And while that does kind of explain it, it doesn't excuse it, and it shouldn't be forgiven for that reason, any more than the shitty ending of anything. Evangelion, for example. It shouldn't be forgiven just because the director and writer was going through a lot of personal problems. Like, I remember a story in the last days of LucasArts, where they had a mad pooper. Seriously, look it up. This is a serious thing that actually happened. A mad pooper that would go into the bathroom and just shit everywhere. And they were pretty sure it was George because he was going through a lot of shit at the time. Like, he was not doing well mentally and emotionally, and things were not going great for him. So I can be understanding. I can be sympathetic. But at the same time, I can't really forgive doing what he did with the prequels. Nobody wants to see a story where they know how it ends and it doesn't end well. It's just like American Horror Story Apocalypse. There's no tension in a story where you know exactly where the people that are supposedly the protagonists are going to be at the end of it. If he had managed to do something different, like with the Anakin clone idea, it would have been much more compelling, and then for the sequels, they could have had someone find Anakin, be like, holy shit, it's Anakin, he's going to bring balance to the Force, because that was what he was supposed to do. Maybe they misunderstood that in the prequels. Maybe the Anakin that they got out of the deep freeze, so to speak, would have been someone who could bring balance to the Force. And yeah, maybe you'd have to fudge things a little bit, but I don't really think so. We could still have the Force ghost of Anakin that appeared in Return of the Jedi just be the clone. Maybe in the end he was redeemed because he had some good of the original Anakin in him. You wouldn't even have to contradict anything, really. But alas, that was not done. Still, there's potential, there's possibility. I mean, let's be honest, the Gundam series is kind of a similarly sci-fi, depressing, but very flashy series, and they've had so many retcons, it's just unbelievable. So why not Star Wars? Why not just go fucking crazy? Go crazy. Open up the extended universe to the fans again. Tell them as long as it doesn't contradict the films, fine. Or if it does, whatever. Fuck it. Stop going after people so hardcore with your lawyers. Let the fans of Star Wars actually be fans and create fan works. Let their imaginations be stimulated and let them stimulate other imaginations in turn. Foster creativity rather than stifling it. There should not be a strict stamp of official and an obsession over canon in something so whimsical and so wondrous. But for fuck's sake, do not just hand-wave it if Lucas decides that he wants to helm future films in the series. We need to keep him accountable. We need to keep a lot of people accountable. But I'm just talking about Star Wars today. Lucas really needs to remember, people aren't just going to say yes to him for everything. And he's not allowed to just do whatever the hell he wants to do. At this point, he has a responsibility not only to tell a compelling story that is true to the spirit of the series, but also he does need to remember that the fans are the way he got to where he is now. The fans are the thing that made Star Wars a success. And like it or not, you have to be faithful to those people. So I say, take the best parts of the new films, the best parts of the old films, the best parts of the prequels, and make a completely new story. I personally would love to see something in the Old Republic. The MMO is really compelling because it's set in that time where there are lots of Jedi and lots of Sith. It's interesting to see that, and it's so rarely delved into in any other medium. Why? That's potentially the most interesting era of the entire setting. Why not base your future stuff around that? There's no reason not to. In any case, I hope I've given you something to think about, and I hope I don't look like too much of a geek, but I really do like Star Wars. Of course, I grew up with it, and but it was funny, I was never as keen on it as I became later. And I saw The Phantom Menace at the theaters, and I really enjoyed it. And of course, that was a strange time in general. But I enjoyed The Phantom Menace, and then I really got into Star Wars for a little bit a few years later. But then I got put off by the rest of the prequels. I didn't think that they were very good, and I kind of lost interest. But I also lost track of the thing that made Star Wars so fun, which is basically it's giving you a lot of interesting characters and dynamics, mechanics of the galaxy, a lot to play with. It's like getting a bunch of action figures and having a little description of who the people are, and then just writing your own story from that. That's part of the fun of Star Wars. And when I got super into it, and really just got back into it in the last few years, that is what appealed to me. And that is what continues to appeal to me. Just give us enough to go on and then let us do the rest ourselves. That also draws us in, so it is a participatory rather than a dictatorial experience, as I have mentioned before. I think that's a better way to go. So you have a lot more passion because you have a very real investment in what is being told because you are part of the story. And I think that is the most important part to remember when you are doing a work of such fantastical fiction. And I hope you've enjoyed my little talk here, and I will have to come back and do another one soon. Take care, everyone, and remember, always oppose evil, always. It is an often said thing that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing, and that is very true. Just a little reminder, something to keep in mind, and something very well illustrated, unfortunately, by the very thing I was criticizing today. So until next time, I'm Hushi. You're welcome. Bye.